So inflation has always been the silent thief that has been stealing the values of our savings, our pensions, and pushing up the cost of living. Now, the importance of getting inflation under control, well, those stakes have rarely been higher. Now, the latest inflation report from the Bank of England and the MPC promises decisive action, but is it truly a turning point that we've all been waiting for? Or has the response come too little, too late to prevent lasting damage to the economy, but also to our wallets? Now, in this video, I'm going to break down some of the key decisions that were made recently in 10 charts. I'm going to be analysing the potential impacts of their decision to lower interest rates, but I'm also going to be asking some tough questions and hopefully provide some answers and some insights for you as well. So are we on the brink of an economic recovery, or are we all heading into a much deeper crisis? More importantly, after the fastest and the steepest and the most aggressive hikes in interest rates in 35 years, why is the Bank of England so reluctant to lower interest rates? And is the recent 0.25% reduction just too little, too late? Now, if you're concerned about your financial future, you won't want to miss what we uncover today, some of which has come direct from a deputy of the Bank of England. My name is Simon and I'm a chartered financial planner, normally based in the UK, but I'm recording this video for you on the magical island of Ibiza. So why don't you follow me back to the studio where we can get into this fascinating topic together. See you in a minute. So welcome back to the Personal Finance Crew, and if this is your first time, a very warm welcome to the Economies channel, where together we're going to be learning the language of money and wealth, but we're also dedicated to mastering money and making financial wisdom available to all. So before we get into this video, I'm going to go and pop up the usual disclaimer to say that this video is for education and entertainment purposes only. I shouldn't really be misconstrued or misunderstood as offering financial advice. So before we get into this, let's just take a step back and ask ourselves, what is inflation and why is it a concern? Well, inflation is the rate at which prices for goods and services rise, and this leads to a decrease in the purchasing power of money. So put another way, as inflation rises, our money buys fewer goods and services. So over time, this inflation will erode the value of our money, meaning that same amount of money will buy less than it used to in the future. So there is currently a basket of goods covering about 700 individual items, which do change over time, and this is used as a basis to calculate inflation. So for example, we've had recent additions to the basket of goods, and they've been things like electric cars and also hand sanitizer, would you believe? But MP3 players, they've been removed, as well as those children's coin-operated rides. Well, I suppose that's progress for you. So what happened at the most recent MPC meeting on the 1st of August? Well, despite all 9 members having access to the exact same economic data, the decision was split down the middle, with 4 members voting to maintain interest rates as they were, and 4 members voting to lower interest rates. So what happened was the governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, he had to use his deciding vote to break the deadlock. So in the end, it was 5-4 to lower interest rates. So the result was then that the bank rate was lowered by 0.25% from 5.25% to 5%. Now, it's a real concern to me that when presented with identical economic data, the MPC was at a stalemate as to the course of action to take. Okay, so let's go through some charts together to try and make sense of this economic data. And I'm going to summarize it in plain English as we go through the video together. So just remember before we start that falling inflation does not mean falling prices. What it does mean is that prices are still rising, but at a slower pace. And that is a big difference. So let's have a look at chart number 1, and that is a current breakdown of inflation in the UK. So you can see the inflation line in white from the very highs of 11.1% in October 2022 to the current level of 2.2%, which was announced yesterday. Now, if you look at the grey box at the right-hand side of the chart, This is where it becomes a projection. So inflation is projected to rise to 2.75% towards the end of this year, and then slowly fall back to the 2% target over time. Now, it's worthwhile mentioning that this chart is taken from various categories and items which may not reflect your personal level of inflation, which may be different because we all spend our money on different things. So for example, 90% of our audience is over 55 years old. So our personal inflation rate could be a lot higher than 2.2%. That said, here's the breakdown. Other goods are really imported goods, and they are represented by the cyan blue colour on the chart. As the bottlenecks caused by the pandemic as well as the war in Ukraine start to get back to normal, you can see now that they make up a much smaller part of inflation. Now, fuels are in the green bar, and as you will have noticed, the cost for petrol and diesel has come down in price, and it's now a negative contributing factor in the inflation story, and that's helping to lower inflation. Now, electricity and gas, they've also come down significantly over the last 2 years, and these are also helping to bring the overall rate of inflation down. Now, food has had crazy price spikes, and whilst food inflation was 17% in 2022, some items like butter, margarine, vegetable oil, pasta and eggs almost doubled in price. Now, services continue to be a major contributor to inflation, and that's one of the reasons why the Bank of England believe that some of these effects could be stubborn and be around for a lot longer than expected. Now, in the UK, we are a services-led economy, so this information may not come as a surprise to you. But it also may be the reason why the Bank of England are reluctant to lower interest rates more quickly. So let's have a quick look at chart number 2, which is about service price inflation. And this chart will help reinforce this idea. So as you can see, where you've got the orange line, this is the average of core goods since the pandemic, and it's actually deflationary, bringing inflation down. The blue cyan line is still well above the pandemic average, and whilst it's falling slowly, it can still become a cause for concern in the future. And let's have a look at chart number 3 about wage growth. And this is a chart that means a lot to all of us. Now, this chart will show wage rises, which peaked last year at 8.6%. but it's fallen slowly as inflation has fallen too. Now, this is projected to fall further to about 4.5%. Now, it's worthwhile mentioning that average earnings are one of the factors used to calculate the triple lock for the state pension, along with the higher of inflation and 2.5%. So if inflation is currently 2.2% and the average earnings is 4.5%, it's very likely that the triple lock for pension increases will be set at around 4.5%. This is going to be another inflation-busting state pension rise for pensioners in 2025. Now, this means that we may all be getting pay rises above the rate of inflation. So these are what we call real pay rises, meaning that we should all be feeling a little bit better off at the end of the month. Now, to help reinforce this point, the next chart shows how wage growth was stronger than projected. Now, you can see here that the grey projections were up to May 2024, and the current projection in August 2024 is at the higher end of those grey tram lines. And this uptick is expected to continue, and understanding why this is happening is a major focus for the Bank of England. Now, I would suggest that companies and employers are paying more money to keep key staff rather than having to recruit and to train new staff, and perhaps the quality of staff may not be there to choose from. So if you're finding value in this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. About 95% of the people who watch these videos have not subscribed. So you know the drill by now. Turn your device sideways so you can see the video better and you can settle in for the second half of the video. You can also hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of this weekly content, and I promise you it's going to help us get this financial wisdom to as many people as possible. So let's have a look at chart number 5 about GDP. Well, GDP is the total value of goods and services produced in the UK, and it reflects the economic activity as well as the health of the UK and this has also surprised to the upside. And many commentators are consistently negative on the UK prospects for growth, but I'm going to leave it to you as to wonder why this is always the case. So growth to the end of March 2024 was 0.7%, and that was the highest in the G7, which is the world's largest advanced economies, and they cover the UK, USA, Canada, Germany, France, Italy, and finally Japan. So the projection for UK GDP for June 2024 is also expected to be around 0.7%, but that's going to be released later this month, and that's expected to then fall back to 0.4% towards the end of the year. So let's have a look at chart number 6 about mortgage rates. So one of the most important effects of interest rates is how it affects our mortgage rates and how much we have to spend to pay for the mortgage at the end of the month. Now, a 5-year fixed rate mortgage in August 2019 was around 1.75%, compared to today's rates, which are closer to 4%. And that is a big increase in mortgage payments. And you can see that edging up in the purple dotted line on the graph. As a comparison, a 2-year fixed rate in 2019 was less than 1.5%. And that today is closer to 5%. And you can see that in the orange dotted line. So mortgage rates, that brings us neatly into house prices on the next chart. So this is a fairly messy chart, but let me walk you through so you can see the following. The ONS house price index in the cyan blue line seems to be rising strongly, but Rightmove in the orange line appears to be falling. Now Halifax in the gold line, that seems to be fairly flat. Now Nationwide in the purple line also seems to be rising. So on balance, house prices have been rising now for the last 5 months, with the average house price in the UK value being around £288,000. And that's an increase of £8,000 from a year ago. Now this is another surprise to the upside. Now is this because we feel more secure in our employment with above average pay rises and a stronger economic growth? Now I will be recording a video about the 18-year property cycle and why there could be a house price crash around the corner in 2026 in just 2 years' time. So make sure you hit the notification bell so you don't miss that video. Okay, so we are almost there. So I wanted to run through some projections which we're going to refer back to in future videos. So the Bank of England uses a 3-year forecast which is going to take us to August 2027, and this is in the grey shaded area. They also use a fan chart to show the possible lows and the possible highs and the most probable amount in the coloured shaded area. So let's have a look at GDP growth. So the most likely path for growth is to see GDP falling back towards the end of the year. And the projection is in the dark shaded area of around 2% growth. But what about employment? Well, it's projected that unemployment will rise to just under 5% and then fall back to 4%. Now remember, there are about 33 million people working in the UK, so a 1% change, higher or lower, will affect 330,000 people as well as their families. So let's hope that the projections are at the lower end of the scale. And finally, inflation. Well, inflation is expected to pick up towards the end of the year to 2.75% and then slowly fall back to the target of 2% in 2026 in 2 years' time. Now, a lot could change in the budget on the 30th of October this year. So make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss that video about how those changes are going to affect all of us. So in conclusion, the Bank of England has reduced interest rates to 5%. Now this restrictive policy will continue to weigh on the economy until the stubborn and the persistent pressures on inflation are more subdued. Now unemployment is expected to rise yet further before falling back. So those on fixed rate mortgages are going to experience a lot more financial pain for years to come, as they are now going to have to fix at a far higher rate, which will mean that the cost of servicing their mortgage is a lot more expensive every month. Now I mentioned the budget on the 30th of October, and maybe you should watch this video here I created about 5 years of hard labour and why the price of victory may cost us all dear for years to come. And I've also highlighted some of the loopholes that could be closed in the budget and the potential tax changes too that may come into effect that are going to cost us all. So thank you so much for watching to the very end. Thank you for your time and for your patience as always, and I'll see you all again next week.